Pay attention to what you're about to see. This is actual footage captured by research technician David Munro on June 18th aboard the oceanographic vessel Aurora Sterling, approximately 340 miles off the coast of Nova Scotia. Watch the submersible camera feed carefully. See that shape emerging from the darkness? That massive, impossible silhouette rising from the depths? David is filming this from the observation deck, and if you listen closely to the original audio, you can hear his breathing change. He goes completely silent. Then, just barely audible, he whispers two words: "It's real." 3 days later, the Aurora Sterling would be found abandoned. 12 people gone without a trace. And this footage? It would become the most controversial piece of evidence in a case that would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about murder, madness, and what lurks in the unexplored ocean. You know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of the ocean, staring out at the horizon, and you get this sense of how small you really are? How insignificant? For Dr. Catherine Rivera, that feeling wasn't terrifying, it was exhilarating. The ocean was her life's work, her passion, her calling. Catherine was 41 years old in the spring of 2017, a renowned marine biologist who dedicated nearly 2 decades to understanding the deep sea. She'd published over 30 papers, discovered 2 new species of deep-sea fish, and had become one of the leading voices in oceanographic research. Her colleagues described her as brilliant, methodical, and absolutely fearless when it came to exploring the unknown. She lived in Halifax with her husband Thomas, a high school biology teacher, and their 2 teenage daughters, Maya and Sophie. By all accounts, it was a good life, stable, happy. Catherine would spend months at sea conducting research, then come home to her family, bringing stories of bioluminescent creatures and underwater mountains taller than Everest. But there was something else about Catherine that most people didn't know. She had become increasingly obsessed with what she called the unexplored majority. See, we've mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deepest parts of our own planet. And Catherine believed, no, she was convinced, that there were things down there, important things, things that could change our understanding of life itself. Her latest project was ambitious, even by her standards. She'd secured funding from the Oceanic Research Institute to conduct a comprehensive survey of the Laurentian Abyss, a deep-sea trench system east of Canada that had never been properly explored. The mission would last 2 weeks aboard the Aurora Sterling, a state-of-the-art research vessel equipped with the latest in sonar technology, submersibles, and deep-sea cameras. Catherine handpicked her crew, 11 people, each an expert in their field. There was Marcus Chen, the ship's captain and a veteran of 20 years at sea. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a Japanese marine geologist. Brothers Daniel and Eric Foster, both experienced submersible pilots. Jennifer Walsh, the ship's engineer. Dr. Ahmed Hassan, a marine chemist. Rebecca Torres, a documentary filmmaker there to capture the expedition. And several others, including navigation specialist Patricia Moore, sonar technician James Park, and research assistants Lisa Greenwood and David Munro. David Munro. Remember that name. The Aurora Sterling departed from Halifax Harbor on June 12, 2017, on a clear, bright morning. Catherine's family was there to see her off. Her daughter Maya would later tell investigators that her mother seemed different that day, more excited than usual, almost giddy. When Maya asked her what she was hoping to find down there, Catherine had smiled and said something strange. "Whatever's been waiting for us." The first few days at sea were routine. The Aurora Sterling made good time, reaching the designated research area on June 14th. The crew settled into their rhythm, running equipment checks, calibrating instruments, reviewing survey patterns. Captain Chen kept a tight ship, and everyone knew their role. Catherine was in her element. She spent hours in the ship's laboratory, preparing collection equipment and reviewing bathymetric maps of the trench system they'd be exploring. The Laurentian Abyss was deep, in some places over 15,000 feet. At those depths, The pressure would crush a human body in seconds. It was a world of perpetual darkness, near-freezing temperatures, and creatures that seemed almost alien in their adaptations. On June 15th, they deployed their first deep-sea camera array. These were sophisticated systems, capable of filming in complete darkness using minimal light that wouldn't disturb deep-sea organisms. The cameras would descend to the ocean floor on reinforced cables, capturing hours of footage that the team would analyze later. David Monroe was responsible for monitoring the camera feeds in real time. He was 28 years old, a recent graduate from the University of British Columbia with a degree in marine technology. This was his first major research expedition, and he took his responsibilities seriously. Maybe too seriously. According to the ship's logs, which would later be recovered, the first anomaly was detected on June 16th at 2:47 a.m. James Park, monitoring the sonar equipment during the night shift, noted unusual organic signature, large scale, depth approximately 12,400 feet. He flagged it for Catherine to review in the morning. When Catherine saw the sonar reading, she was skeptical but intrigued. The signature was massive, far larger than any known deep-sea creature. Whales didn't dive that deep. Giant squid, even the largest specimens, wouldn't show up on sonar like that. The shape was wrong too. Elongated, almost architectural in its symmetry. Could be a geological formation, suggested Dr. Tanaka, studying the data. Maybe an underwater rock formation that's shaped unusually. But Catherine wasn't convinced. "Rock doesn't move," she said, pointing to the timestamp. "Look at this reading from 2:47 and then this one from 2:51. Same signature, but it shifted position by almost 200 meters. The room went quiet. "Could be a current," James offered, but his voice lacked conviction. Catherine made a decision. They would deploy the submersible for a closer look. The Aurora. Sterling carried a two-person deep-sea submersible capable of reaching depths of 20,000 feet. It was equipped with high-definition cameras, collection arms, and enough life support for 12 hours underwater. Daniel Foster would pilot the submersible. His brother Eric would join him as co-pilot and observer. They'd done dozens of dives together, exploring shipwrecks and deep-sea vents. This should have been just another day at work. The dive began at 10:15 a.m. on June 17th. Weather conditions were perfect. Calm seas, clear visibility at the surface. The submersible, nicknamed the Challenger, was lowered into the water and began its descent. If you've never seen footage of a deep-sea dive, let me paint you a picture. For the first few hundred feet, sunlight penetrates the water. You can see fish, kelp, the shimmer of the surface above. But as you descend, the light fades. Blue becomes indigo. Indigo becomes black. By the time you reach 3,000 feet, you're in what scientists call the midnight zone. No light penetrates. The pressure is crushing. And the only things alive down there are creatures that have adapted to conditions that would kill almost anything else. Daniel and Eric maintained radio contact with the Aurora Sterling as they descended. Their voices were calm, professional, calling out depth readings and system checks. At 8,000 feet, they reported passing through a thermocline, a layer where the water temperature dropped sharply. At 10,000 feet, they switched on the submersible's external lights. "Visual contact," Daniel's voice crackled over the radio. "Ocean floor visible below us. Looks like sediment, possibly manganese nodules. No sign of the anomaly yet." They spent the next hour exploring the area where the sonar signature had been detected. The ocean floor at that depth was barren, desolate, just endless sediment occasionally broken by rock formations or the skeletal remains of marine creatures that had died in the surface waters and sank. But they found nothing unusual, no massive creature, no strange formation, nothing that could explain the sonar readings. "Maybe it moved on," Eric suggested. "Whatever it was." They were about to begin their ascent when David Monroe, monitoring the dive from the surface, noticed something on the submersible's rear camera feed. "Challenger, you've got something behind you, approximately 500 meters. It's big." Daniel maneuvered the submersible around, aiming the main lights in the direction David indicated, and that's when they saw it. "Jesus Christ," Eric whispered. The footage from that moment still exists. It was recorded automatically by the submersible's cameras and later recovered by investigators. What it shows is hard to describe. There's a shape in the darkness, just at the edge of the submersible's light range. Massive. The lights can't illuminate all of it. It's too large. But you can see texture. Something that looks almost like stone, but organic, curved, ancient. "Is that—" Daniel's voice was shaking. "Is that a whale?" But they both knew it wasn't. The shape was wrong. The scale was wrong. And whales don't stay motionless at 12,000 feet. Catherine's voice came over the radio, tight with controlled excitement. "Challenger, I need you to approach slowly. Get us better footage." "Dr. Rivera, I don't think—" Daniel began. "That's an order, Daniel. We came here to explore. Get closer." The submersible moved forward, its motors humming in the silence of the deep. As they approached, the shape became clearer. It was definitely organic, definitely alive. The texture of the surface seemed to ripple, almost imperceptibly, like breathing. They were maybe 200 meters away when it moved. Not quickly, not aggressively. It simply shifted, rotating in the water with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. And as it turned, the submersible's lights caught something that made both men gasp. An eye, or what looked like an eye. Massive, reflective, watching them. "We're aborting," Daniel said, his voice no longer calm. "Bringing Challenger up. Now." Catherine started to protest, but Captain Chen cut her off. "Agreed. Bring them up." The ascent should have taken 3 hours. Daniel pushed the systems harder than recommended, making it in 2.5. When the submersible surfaced and was hauled back onto the Aurora Sterling, both men emerged pale and shaking. That night, Catherine called a meeting in the ship's mess hall. All 12 crew members were present. The footage from the submersible dive was played on a laptop screen. "What we saw today," Catherine began, "could be the most significant marine discovery in human history. I know it seems impossible. I know what you're all thinking, but we have to investigate further." "With all due respect, Dr. Rivera," Captain Chen said carefully, "we need to consider the safety of this crew. Whatever that thing is, it's massive, and we don't understand it." "Which is exactly why we need to study it," Catherine argued. "This could rewrite everything we know about deep-sea life, about evolution, about what's possible." The discussion went on for over an hour. Some crew members were excited, curious. Others were frightened. Dr. Tanaka pointed out that they didn't have the equipment or the expertise to properly study a creature of that size. Rebecca Torres, the filmmaker, was absolutely convinced they should continue. This was the story of a lifetime. But it was David Monroe who said something that should have been a warning. "What if it doesn't want to be found?" Everyone looked at him. "I mean," he continued, fidgeting with his hands, "it's been down there, hidden, for who knows how long, in one of the deepest, most remote parts of the ocean. What if it chose to be hidden?" "It's an animal, David," Catherine said, not unkindly. "It doesn't choose anything. It just exists." "But what if you're wrong?" The question hung in the air. In the end, Catherine convinced them to stay. Just a few more days. They would deploy additional camera arrays, collect more sonar data, and see if they could establish a pattern to the creature's movements. No more submersible dives, no unnecessary risks, just observation. Captain Chen agreed reluctantly, but he made Catherine promise that if anything seemed dangerous, they would return to Halifax immediately. That night, Rebecca Torres couldn't sleep. She spent hours in the editing bay, reviewing footage from the dive. She'd been filming a documentary about deep-sea research, expecting to capture interesting fish and maybe some unusual geological formations. Instead, she'd gotten something that could make her career. But as she watched the footage for the 10th time, something bothered her. When the creature turned, when that eye became visible, there was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where it seemed like the creature was looking directly at the camera, not just seeing it, but understanding it, recognizing it as something foreign, something that didn't belong. She saved the file with shaking hands and finally went to bed just after 3 a.m. She would be one of the first to disappear. June 18th started like any other day at sea, or at least it tried to. The crew of the Aurora Sterling went through their morning routines, breakfast in the mess hall, equipment checks, reviewing the previous night's data. But there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone knew what was down there in the darkness below them. David Monroe was already at his station by 6 a.m., monitoring the camera arrays they'd deployed the previous evening. These were set at various depths, creating a three-dimensional view of the water column beneath the ship. Most showed the expected things: occasional fish, drifting particles, the slow dance of marine snow falling toward the ocean floor. But the deepest camera, the one positioned at 11,800 feet, showed something else. "Dr. Rivera!" David called out, his voice tight. "You need to see this." Catherine was there in seconds, still holding her coffee mug. She leaned over David's shoulder to look at the monitor. The creature was back, and it was closer. The camera couldn't capture all of it. It was too large, too close. But what they could see was mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. The texture of its skin, if you could call it that, seemed to shift and change. Patterns rippled across its surface, almost like bioluminescence, but different. Darker. The patterns seemed deliberate, mathematical, like some form of communication. "It's been there for 3 hours," David said quietly. "Just sitting there, right in front of the camera." "Has it moved at all?" "No, not even a little." Catherine watched for several minutes, her coffee growing cold in her hand. The creature remained motionless, waiting. "Get Captain Chen," she said finally, "and wake up everyone else. We need to document this." By 8 a.m., the entire crew was gathered in the monitoring station, watching the feeds. The atmosphere was electric, fear and excitement in equal measure. Dr. Hassan was taking measurements, trying to estimate the creature's size from the partial images. His preliminary calculations suggested it was at least 200 feet long, possibly larger. "That's impossible," Dr. Tanaka said, shaking her head. "The blue whale is the largest animal ever known to exist, and they max out at around 100 feet. What could possibly sustain something twice that size at these depths?" "The laws of biology don't stop applying just because we're uncomfortable," Dr. Hassan replied. "But I agree, it shouldn't exist. And yet there it is." It was Rebecca Torres who suggested they try to communicate. "What if we use the submersible's sonar? Send a pattern, see if it responds?" "Absolutely not," Captain Chen said immediately. "We're not provoking that thing." "I'm not suggesting we provoke it," Rebecca argued. "I'm suggesting we try to understand it. If it's intelligent—" "It's a fish," Catherine interrupted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Rebecca pulled up the footage from the previous day's dive on her laptop. "Look at this. Really look. The way it moved. The way it watched the submersible. That's not animal behavior. That's not reflexive. That's observation. That's curiosity. Maybe even intelligence." The debate continued for another hour. Some crew members thought Rebecca was anthropomorphizing, seeing patterns that weren't there. Others weren't so sure. James Park pointed out that whales, dolphins, and octopi all showed signs of intelligence. Why couldn't something else? In the end, they decided to wait. Observe. Collect data without interaction. But the creature had other plans. At 1:47 p.m., all the lights on the Aurora Sterling went out. Every single one. The ship was plunged into darkness. Emergency power kicked in after 5 seconds, but those 5 seconds felt eternal to everyone on board. "What the hell was that?" Captain Chen demanded, already heading for the engine room. Jennifer Walsh, the ship's engineer, was running diagnostics. "I don't know. The main power just cut out. Everything. But there's no failure. No blown fuses. No damaged systems. It just stopped." "That doesn't happen," Captain Chen said. "I know it doesn't happen, but it did." The power came back on its own 20 minutes later, just as inexplicably as it had failed. Every system showed normal, no damage, no malfunction. It was as if someone had simply flipped a switch off and then on again. David Monroe, who'd stayed at his monitoring station during the blackout, noticed something else. During those 20 minutes of power failure, the deep camera array had continued recording on battery backup, and the creature had moved. It was no longer hovering in front of the deepest camera. Instead, it had risen several thousand feet. The mid-level cameras, positioned at 8,000 and 6,000 feet, showed parts of it passing by, moving upward, moving toward the surface, toward them. "How fast is it moving?" Catherine asked, leaning close to the monitor. David checked the timestamps. "Based on the camera positions, it's ascending at roughly 500 feet every 2 minutes. Dr. Hassan did the math quickly. "At that rate, it'll reach the surface in 45 minutes, David finished. The ship went quiet. You could hear the ocean against the hull, the hum of the engines. Someone's breathing too fast. "We need to move," Patricia Moore said from the navigation station. "Now!" Captain Chen didn't argue. "Moore, plot a course back to Halifax. Full speed. Everyone else, secure all equipment. We're leaving." But as the Aurora Sterling's engines powered up, something strange happened. The ship's navigation systems began showing errors. GPS coordinates were jumping, placing them in impossible locations. First near Greenland, then off the coast of Spain, then in the middle of the Pacific. The compass spun wildly. "I can't get a fix," Patricia said, frustration and fear creeping into her voice. "Nothing's making sense. The satellites are showing our position, but every receiver is giving me different data." "Navigate by dead reckoning," Captain Chen ordered. "Use the charts, the old-fashioned way." But even that proved difficult. The ship's course seemed wrong, the water behaving strangely. They should have been moving away from the research site, but the sonar showed they were still directly above the deep trench. It was Jennifer Walsh who figured it out. "The current," she said. "Look at the water flow patterns. There's a current pulling us back, a strong one, but that doesn't make sense. There shouldn't be any current this strong in this area, unless something was creating it. Something large, something moving in the water, generating its own currents." At 3:15 p.m., the creature surfaced, not right next to the ship, thank God, but close enough, about 800 meters off the starboard side. What emerged from the water defied description. David Monroe, who'd grabbed his camera and run to the observation deck, captured the footage that would later become central to the investigation. You've seen the image, that massive shape, dark and textured, rising from the depths, the water cascading off it, the sheer impossible scale of it. "It's real," David whispered, filming. "It's real." The creature, if you could even call it that, remained partially surfaced for almost 5 minutes. Crew members who witnessed it would later struggle to describe what they saw. Some said it looked like a whale, but wrong, distorted, ancient. Others said it looked like stone that breathed. Dr. Tanaka, who had a background in paleontology, said it reminded her of extinct marine reptiles, but orders of magnitude larger. The only thing everyone agreed on was the eye. When the creature rotated slightly in the water, they could see it clearly. Massive, reflective, eerily intelligent, and it was looking at them. At the ship. At each of them individually, it seemed. Catherine stood on the deck, frozen. Her scientific mind was screaming at her to take measurements, collect samples, document everything. But another part of her, the part that remembered being a small child afraid of the dark, wanted to run. The creature submerged as slowly as it had surfaced. No splash. No sound except the displacement of water. It simply sank back into the depths, and then it was gone. For a long moment, nobody on the Aurora Sterling moved. Then Captain Chen's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "Everyone to the mess hall, now. We need to talk." The meeting was tense. Some crew members wanted to leave immediately, to hell with the mission. Others were still caught up in the magnitude of what they'd witnessed, but there was one voice that stood out, that should have been a red flag to everyone present. David Monroe was calm, too calm. "We can't leave," he said quietly. "Not yet." Everyone turned to look at him. "David," Jennifer Walsh said carefully, "that thing is dangerous. We don't know what it's capable of." "It's not dangerous," David interrupted. "If it wanted to hurt us, it would have already. Don't you see? It's been watching us, observing us. It let us see it. It wanted us to see it." "You don't know that," Captain Chen said. "I do." David's voice was firm. "I've been listening. In my quarters, at night. I can hear it. Not with my ears, but—" He tapped his temple. "In here. It's calling to us, to all of us, calling us down." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "David," Catherine said slowly, "what are you talking about?" "The deep," he said, and his eyes were distant, unfocused. "It's calling from the deep. It's been calling for so long, waiting for someone to hear. And I hear it. I hear it so clearly now." Dr. Hassan stood up. "David, I think you need to rest. You've been monitoring equipment for hours. You're exhausted." "I'm not crazy." David's voice was sharp now. "And I'm not the only one who hears it. Am I, Dr. Torres?" Rebecca Torres had gone pale. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You hear it too. In the footage, in the patterns on its skin. That's language, communication. It's been trying to talk to us, and we've been too stupid to listen." Captain Chen made a decision. "David, you're relieved of duty. Dr. Hassan, I want you to check him out. Make sure he's okay." "I'm fine," David insisted, but two crew members, Daniel and Eric Foster, had already moved to flank him, not aggressively, but ready. "Then you'll be fine after some rest," Captain Chen said firmly. "Take him to his quarters." As David was escorted out, he called back over his shoulder. "You can't run from it. It knows we're here. It's been waiting for us. We're supposed to go down there. We're supposed to—" The door closed, cutting him off. The remaining crew members looked at each other in the heavy silence that followed. "Okay," Jennifer finally said. "Now we definitely need to leave." But leaving proved harder than anyone expected. The ship's engines were working fine. The hull was intact. All systems showed operational. But the Aurora Sterling wasn't moving. Every time they tried to pull away from the research site, they ended up back where they started. The GPS was still unreliable, but the sonar didn't lie. They were trapped. "There must be something wrong with the propulsion system," Jennifer insisted, running diagnostics for the 5th time. "Or maybe the rudder is damaged, something mechanical that we're missing." But deep down, everyone knew it wasn't mechanical. By nightfall on June 18th, a sense of dread had settled over the ship. Crew members stayed together in small groups, nobody wanting to be alone. The ocean around them was calm, too calm, glass-like, unnatural. Catherine was in her quarters, trying to compose a message to her family via satellite phone, when she heard someone at her door. It was Rebecca Torres. "Can we talk?" Rebecca asked. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Catherine let her in. "What's wrong?" "David was right," Rebecca said quietly. "About me. I do hear it. Not voices exactly. More like feelings, impressions. Ever since I watched that footage, it's been in my head. This sense of something vast and old and waiting." Catherine wanted to dismiss it as stress, as fear, as the human brain's tendency to find patterns where none existed. But she couldn't, because if she was honest with herself, she'd felt it too. A pull. A whisper at the edge of her consciousness, like someone calling her name from very far away. "What does it want?" Catherine asked. Rebecca shook her head. "I don't know, but I think David does. Or he thinks he does." They decided to check on David. When they reached his quarters, the door was ajar. Inside, they found his bunk empty. His belongings were still there, but David himself was gone. They found him on the stern deck, standing at the rail, looking out at the dark water. "David?" Catherine called softly, approaching carefully. "What are you doing out here?" He didn't turn around. Listening. To what? The deep. It's singing. He tilted his head as if hearing distant music. "Can't you hear it? It's beautiful." Catherine was about to respond when she noticed something in the water. A glow. Faint, blue-green, pulsing, and it was getting brighter. "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered. The creature was directly below them, just beneath the surface, and its skin was glowing, patterns of light moving across its body in waves. It was like nothing Catherine had ever seen. Complex, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. "It's talking," David said, his voice full of wonder. "It's trying to communicate." More crew members had noticed and were coming out on deck. They stood together, watching the light show beneath the water. Despite the fear, despite the rational part of their brains screaming at them to get away, they couldn't look away. The patterns were mesmerizing. They seemed to mean something, to carry information in their arrangement. And as everyone watched, they began to feel it. That pull, that whisper, that sense of something ancient and incomprehensible, trying to reach across the vast gulf between its understanding and theirs. "We need to go inside," Captain Chen said, breaking the spell. "Now, everyone inside." But David didn't move. "I need to go down there," he said simply. "I need to see it up close." "That's not happening," Daniel Foster said, moving toward David. David finally turned to face them, and his expression was serene, peaceful. "You don't understand. It's not hostile. It's lonely. It's been alone in the dark for so long, and it's calling out, hoping someone will answer." "David, you're not thinking clearly," Catherine tried. "I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have." He looked at her, and his eyes were clear, focused. "Dr. Rivera, you've dedicated your life to understanding the ocean, to discovering what's hidden in the depths. And now, the greatest discovery in human history is right here, trying to communicate with us, and you're too afraid to listen." The words hit harder than they should have. Before anyone could stop him, David climbed over the rail. "David, no!" Rebecca screamed. But he was already falling. The splash seemed too small, too insignificant for what it meant. By the time Daniel and Eric grabbed a life ring and threw it in, David was already swimming, not away from the ship, but down, diving beneath the surface, toward the light. The crew rushed to the rail, searching the water. For a moment, they could see David's silhouette against the glow. He was swimming down, strong strokes, purposeful. The patterns of light on the creature seemed to intensify, pulsing faster. And then David was gone, swallowed by the darkness and the light. They searched for hours. The lifeboat was deployed. Spotlights swept the water. They called his name until their voices were hoarse. But David Monroe had vanished into the deep, and he wasn't coming back. By midnight, Captain Chen made the call to stop the search. David was gone. But the nightmare was just beginning. The night of June 18th was the longest of anyone's life aboard the Aurora Sterling. After David's disappearance, Captain Chen ordered everyone to stay inside, to stay together. No one was to go on deck alone. No one was to go near the rails. But maintaining order on a ship trapped in the middle of the ocean with something impossible lurking below was harder than anyone anticipated. Rebecca Torres locked herself in the editing bay, compulsively reviewing footage. She was looking for something, anything that might explain what was happening. In the footage David had captured of the creature at the surface, she noticed something she'd missed before. In the reflective surface of its eye, if you enhanced the image, you could see the Aurora Sterling. But not just the ship. You could see individual people on the deck, as if the creature was looking at each of them individually, cataloging them. In the engine room, Jennifer Walsh was having her own crisis. The engines were fine. Everything was fine. But they still couldn't move. She sat with her back against the bulkhead, holding a wrench, trying to understand how a ship with working engines could be held in place by what? Water? A current? Or something else? Dr. Tanaka and Dr. Hassan had barricaded themselves in the laboratory, trying to find rational explanations. They analyzed water samples, reviewed sonar data, went over every piece of information they'd collected. But the data didn't lie. There was something in the water. Something massive. Something that shouldn't exist but did. Captain Chen was on the bridge with Patricia Moore and James Park, trying to get the navigation systems working properly. They'd sent multiple distress signals via radio and satellite, but the responses they got were strange. Other ships reported receiving their signals, but the coordinates were wrong. Some said the Aurora Sterling was reporting a position in the Arctic. Others said the Pacific. It was as if the ship existed in multiple places at once, or nowhere at all. Catherine Rivera sat in her quarters, staring at a picture of her family on her phone. She'd managed to get a message out to Thomas hours ago, telling him something had gone wrong with the research, that they were heading back early. She hadn't told him about the creature. She hadn't told him about David. How could she? How could she possibly explain? Around 2 a.m., the ship's power failed again. This time, it stayed off longer. 15 minutes. 20. People huddled together in the darkness, listening to the ocean against the hull, listening to each other's breathing, listening for any sound that might suggest the creature was close. When the lights finally came back on, someone was missing. Rebecca Torres was gone. They found the editing bay empty, her laptop still open, playing the footage of David's final moments on loop. Her jacket was still on the chair, her shoes were still by the door, but Rebecca herself had vanished. The search of the ship took an hour. Every room, every storage locker, every possible space where a person could hide. Nothing. She was simply gone. How? Jennifer demanded, her voice breaking. How does someone disappear from a locked ship? Nobody had an answer. But Catherine noticed something. Rebecca's laptop still playing that footage, and on the screen, paused, was an image of the creature's eye. And in the reflection, clear as day, was Rebecca Torres standing on the deck. Standing on the deck at night, in this reflection captured during the day. Check the deck, Catherine said quietly. Check now. They found Rebecca's camera on the stern deck, placed carefully on the deck next to the rail. It was still recording. When they played back the footage, they saw her. Rebecca had left the editing bay around 1:45 a.m. during the power outage. She'd walked to the stern deck in complete darkness, guided by something. The footage showed her standing at the rail, looking out at the water, and then she'd climbed over and dropped into the ocean, just like David. No hesitation, no fear. On the audio, barely audible, they could hear her voice. "I'm coming, I hear you, I'm coming." The crew of the Aurora Sterling was now down to 10. The rest of that night passed in shocked silence. Some people cried. Others sat in numb disbelief. Dr. Hassan sedated Lisa Greenwood when she started hyperventilating, convinced she would be next. When dawn finally broke on June 19th, Captain Chen made an announcement over the intercom. "We're abandoning ship. We're taking the lifeboat and the emergency raft. We're leaving right now." Nobody argued. It took 30 minutes to prepare. They grabbed emergency supplies, life jackets, flares, the satellite phone. Catherine hesitated before leaving her quarters, looking at all her research notes, all the data they'd collected, a lifetime of work. But none of it mattered now. The lifeboat was deployed at 7:15 a.m. It was designed to hold 15 people comfortably. With 10 of them, there was plenty of room. Captain Chen took the tiller. Patricia Moore had the GPS. They would head east, toward the shipping lanes, toward civilization. As they pulled away from the Aurora Sterling, Catherine looked back at the ship. It sat there in the calm water, looking strangely peaceful. Normal. As if nothing terrible had happened aboard it. The lifeboat made good progress for about 30 minutes. The sun was fully up, warm and bright. For the first time in days, people began to feel hope. Then James Park, who was scanning the water with binoculars, went rigid. "No!" he whispered. "No, no, no!" "What is it?" Captain Chen demanded. James lowered the binoculars slowly. "Look behind us." Everyone turned. The Aurora Sterling was there, right there, maybe 200 meters away. But they'd been traveling at full speed for 30 minutes. They should have been miles from the ship. "How is that possible?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her voice hollow. Patricia Moore was checking the GPS frantically. "We're moving. The GPS shows we're moving. We've traveled over 3 nautical miles." "Then how?" Jennifer began, but she stopped, because she saw it too. They all did. In the water between the lifeboat and the Aurora Sterling, the surface was rippling. Not from waves, not from wind. Something beneath was moving, something vast. "We're right above it," Eric Foster said quietly. "We've been right above it this whole time." The creature surfaced then, not quickly, not violently. It simply rose from below, emerging around them like an island appearing from the depths. The lifeboat was lifted gently, carried on its back like a toy. People screamed. Some grabbed for the sides of the boat. Others simply froze, unable to process what was happening. Catherine found herself looking directly at that eye again. Massive, ancient, intelligent. And in that moment, she understood something that David and Rebecca had understood before her. It wasn't hostile, it was curious. This creature had lived in the deepest parts of the ocean for how long? Centuries, millennia, longer? Alone in the dark, perhaps the last of its kind. And then it had detected the Aurora Sterling, this strange metal object probing its domain. It had investigated, and in investigating, it had discovered something it had never encountered before. Intelligence. Not fish or squid or other creatures of the deep, but something different. Something that could think, create, wonder. Something that could potentially understand. And it was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. "It wants us to stay," Catherine said aloud. Everyone looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Dr. Rivera," Captain Chen started. "I know how it sounds, but think about it. It hasn't hurt us. It could have destroyed the ship at any time. It could have killed all of us. But it hasn't. It keeps bringing us back. It's keeping us here." "2 people are dead," Daniel Foster said angrily. "Are they?" Catherine challenged. "Did we see them die, or did they go to it willingly?" The question hung in the air. The creature began to submerge again, lowering the lifeboat gently back into the water. As it descended, those patterns appeared on its skin again, lights pulsing in complex arrangements, communication, and standing at the rail of the Aurora Sterling, impossible but undeniable, were David Monroe and Rebecca Torres. They were too far away to see clearly, but the binoculars confirmed it. Both of them, alive, standing on the deck, watching the lifeboat, and they were smiling. "This isn't happening," Lisa Greenwood whimpered. "This isn't real." But it was real. All of it was real. Over the next hour, 3 more crew members went back to the Aurora Sterling. Not dragged, not forced. They simply announced their intention, climbed out of the lifeboat, and swam back to the ship. Dr. Hassan was first, then the Foster brothers. They all said the same thing before they left. "I want to understand." By noon on June 19th, only 6 people remained in the lifeboat. Captain Chen, Patricia Moore, Jennifer Walsh, Dr. Tanaka, Lisa Greenwood, and Catherine Rivera. "We're going to die out here," Lisa said. She'd gone quiet, resigned. "One by one, that thing is going to take us. Or we could go back," Patricia said softly. Maybe they're right. David and Rebecca and the others. Maybe it's not dangerous. Maybe it's just trying to... "Don't," Captain Chen interrupted. "Don't let it in your head. Whatever that thing is doing, whatever David and the others think they're experiencing, it's not real. It's some kind of, I don't know, pheromone or sonar or something affecting their brains." "You don't know that," Catherine said. "And you don't know it's safe." They argued for another hour, but the truth was they had no good options. The creature clearly wasn't going to let them leave. They were trapped, and they were running out of time. The lifeboat had supplies for a few days at most. That afternoon, Catherine made her decision. "I'm going back," she announced. "Catherine, no," Dr. Tanaka pleaded. "You saw what happened to the others." "I saw them alive and apparently unharmed, and I saw something else. I saw the greatest scientific discovery in human history, and I've spent my whole life preparing for this moment." "This isn't science," Captain Chen said. "This is survival." "Maybe they're the same thing." Catherine started putting on a life jacket. "I need to know. I need to understand. And if I don't come back, or if something happens, tell my family I love them. Tell them I was doing what I believed in." She went over the side before anyone could stop her. The swim back to the Aurora Sterling took 20 minutes. Catherine was exhausted when she finally pulled herself up the ladder on the ship's side. She stood on the deck, dripping, breathing hard. David Monroe was there waiting for her. He looked different, calmer. His eyes were clear and focused in a way they hadn't been before. "Welcome back, Dr. Rivera," he said with a gentle smile. "We've been waiting for you." "David," Catherine said, "what happened to you? What is this?" "Understanding," he replied simply. "Come on, there's someone who wants to meet you." He led her down into the ship, past the laboratories and crew quarters, down to the lowest deck. There was a hatch there that led to an access space between the hull and the inner wall, a maintenance area that was rarely used. David opened the hatch. Inside, the space had been changed. The walls were covered in that same bioluminescent pattern they'd seen on the creature, glowing, pulsing, and in the center of the space, water had somehow gotten in, creating a pool that shouldn't exist. And rising from that pool was a tendril of the creature itself. It had extended part of itself up through a small breach in the hull, creating a direct connection between the ship and its body. "It's been learning about us," David explained, "studying us through our tools, our instruments. It's incredibly intelligent, Dr. Rivera, more than we can possibly comprehend, and it's been alone for so long." Catherine approached the pool slowly. The tendril swayed gently, almost like a greeting. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Impossible is just another word for things we don't understand yet. You taught me that." Catherine reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand on the tendril's surface. It was warm, smooth, and the moment she made contact, her mind exploded with images, feelings, information. She saw the deep, the endless, crushing darkness of the ocean floor. She felt the cold and the pressure and the profound isolation. She experienced the passage of time in a way no human ever had. Centuries flowing like water, millennia passing in the blink of an eye. And she felt the loneliness. God, the loneliness. The creature had been alone for so long, perhaps the last of its species, living in a world humans had barely touched, waiting for something, anything, to break the terrible silence. When Catherine pulled her hand away, she was crying. "Now you understand," David said quietly. She did. She understood everything. The creature wasn't trying to harm them. It was trying to connect. And in trying to connect, it had accidentally terrified them, driven them away, caused tragedy. But maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was a way to bridge the gap between two forms of intelligence that had never been meant to meet. Catherine spent the rest of June 19th and all of June 20th learning. David and the others who'd returned to the ship showed her what they'd discovered. The creature could communicate through touch, through light patterns, through something that felt like telepathy, but was probably more like extremely sophisticated sonar manipulation. It was sharing its knowledge of the deep ocean, showing them things no human had ever seen. But it was also struggling to understand humans, their fragility, their fear, their complex social structures and emotions. On June 21st, Catherine convinced the creature to let the remaining crew members leave. It took hours of communication, of trying to convey concepts like family and home and the world beyond the ocean, but eventually the creature understood, and it let go. The lifeboat with Captain Chen and the others was able to motor away. This time, they weren't pulled back. The creature didn't follow them, and when the Coast Guard found them 2 days later, on June 23rd, sunburned and dehydrated but alive, they told a story that nobody believed. They said a storm had hit, equipment malfunction, mass hysteria, anything but the truth. Because how do you tell the truth when the truth is impossible? Meanwhile, Catherine and the 6 crew members who'd chosen to stay remained on the Aurora Sterling, anchored above the trench. They continued to communicate with the creature, to learn from it, to teach it about humanity. They stayed for another week. By the end, they'd compiled thousands of pages of notes, hours of footage, and data that would revolutionize multiple fields of science. But they also made a decision. Together. Some discoveries, they realized, humanity wasn't ready for. The existence of this creature, its intelligence, its vulnerability. If the world knew, what would happen? Scientific expeditions at first, certainly, but then exploitation, military interest. Someone would try to capture it, study it, weaponize it. This creature had survived for potentially millions of years by staying hidden. Who were they to expose it? On June 29, 2017, Catherine Rivera and the crew members who'd stayed with her said goodbye to the creature. They conveyed as best they could the concept that they would never return, that they would keep it secret, that it would remain safe in the deep. The creature seemed to understand. The light patterns it displayed felt like sadness, but also like gratitude. The Aurora Sterling returned to Halifax on July 2, 2017. 7 people on board, 5 missing and presumed dead: David Monroe, Rebecca Torres, Dr. Ahmed Hassan, Daniel Foster, and Eric Foster. The story they told was simple: a storm, equipment failure, people lost overboard. Tragic but not unheard of in maritime research, but investigators knew something was wrong. The investigation into the Aurora Sterling incident took 6 months. Federal maritime authorities combed through every inch of the ship, reviewed every piece of equipment, interviewed every survivor multiple times. They found inconsistencies immediately. The ship showed no storm damage. The equipment was functional. The ship's logs had been altered, with days missing or rewritten. And then there was the footage. David Monroe's camera, found in his quarters, contained the video that showed the creature. The same footage that's become notorious in certain circles. But officially, the investigation determined it was a hoax, CGI, a prank gone wrong. The families of the missing crew members were devastated. Thomas Rivera, Catherine's husband, spent months trying to get answers. Why was his wife claiming not to remember 3 full days? Why did the timeline not match the ship's logs? Why was everyone involved giving the same rehearsed answers? But he never got the truth. Dr. Yuki Tanaka quietly left the field of marine biology. She moved to Kyoto and became a teacher. When asked about the Aurora Sterling, she said simply, "Some things are better left undiscovered." Captain Marcus Chen was cleared of any wrongdoing but chose early retirement. He lives in Nova Scotia now, and he never goes near the ocean. Patricia Moore, Jennifer Walsh, and Lisa Greenwood all continued their careers in marine science, but none of them ever returned to deep-sea research. They stuck to coastal waters, shallow depths, places where sunlight reached. And Catherine Rivera? She continued her work, became even more successful, published groundbreaking papers on deep-sea ecosystems. But she never went back to the Laurentian abyss, never explained the gaps in her story, never spoke publicly about what really happened on the Aurora Sterling. In private, though, she kept detailed journals, encrypted files on a secure drive, documentation of everything they'd witnessed, everything they'd learned. She left instructions that these files were to be opened 50 years after her death. Maybe by then, she wrote, humanity would be ready. The families of the missing crew members never found closure. There were memorial services, of course, graves with no bodies, names on plaques, but the not knowing haunted them. David Monroe's mother spent her final years convinced her son was still alive somewhere. She'd get these feelings, she said, these certainties that he was out there, in the deep, happy somehow, People thought she was in denial, unable to accept her loss. But maybe she was right. Because here's something investigators never released publicly, something that Captain Chen mentioned to a single Coast Guard officer who was a close friend. A week after the Aurora Sterling returned, several fishing vessels operating near the Laurentian Abyss reported strange sonar contacts, large organic signatures at extreme depths. And on one occasion, a trawler's deep camera caught something that made the crew refuse to return to that area. It was brief, just a few seconds of footage. But in those few seconds, you can see something massive in the darkness. And on its surface, those telltale patterns of light. And if you enhance the image, if you really study it, you can see what looks like shapes moving within the creature. Human-sized shapes, swimming, living, somehow surviving at depths that should kill any person instantly. But that footage was confiscated, classified for reasons of national security. The fishing crew was paid to stay quiet, because some secrets are too big. Some truths are too strange. Some discoveries challenge everything we think we know about what's possible. No charges were ever filed in connection with the Aurora Sterling incident. Officially, the 5 crew members were declared dead by misadventure, accidental drowning during a maritime accident. No criminal investigation was opened. No trial was held. But unofficially, questions remain. Did the survivors conspire to hide the truth? Did something happen aboard that ship that was covered up? The families of the missing never got answers, never got justice. The Aurora Sterling was decommissioned quietly in 2018. It was sold for scrap, cut apart, and recycled. The official reason was that the ship was outdated and no longer needed. But people who worked on the decommissioning crew reported strange things. Tools that wouldn't work near certain parts of the ship, electronic equipment that malfunctioned, and everyone agreed on one thing: the ship felt wrong, like something had marked it, changed it in ways that couldn't be measured but could definitely be felt. The Laurentian Abyss remains largely unexplored to this day. A few research vessels have passed through the area, but deep exploration has been quietly avoided. There's always a reason: budget cuts, equipment issues, other priorities. But the truth is simpler and stranger. We're afraid of what we might find down there. As for Catherine Rivera, she continued her research until her death in 2024 from natural causes. She was 48 years old. At her funeral, her husband Thomas read a statement she'd prepared to be shared after her passing. To my family, my colleagues, and anyone who's searching for answers about what happened aboard the Aurora Sterling. The ocean keeps its secrets, and sometimes we must keep them too. I saw something impossible become real, and I made choices I believed were right. Whether history judges those choices kindly or harshly, I stand by them. We are not alone on this planet. We have never been alone. And perhaps that's the most important discovery of all, one that changes everything, even if we're not allowed to speak it aloud. The encrypted files she mentioned? They're in a bank vault in Halifax, sealed until 2074. Maybe by then, the world will be ready for the truth. Or maybe the truth will stay buried, like so many other secrets in the deep places of the world. Today, if you talk to marine biologists who work in deep-sea research, some of them will tell you privately about anomalies they've encountered. Sonar contacts that don't match any known species. Camera footage that shows shapes that shouldn't exist. Fishermen will tell you about areas they avoid, places where the water feels wrong, where equipment fails for no reason. And if you're very lucky, or very unlucky, you might meet someone who was involved in deep-sea research in 2017. Someone who knows someone who knows someone who was there. And if you ask them about the Aurora Sterling, they'll usually change the subject. But sometimes, late at night, after a few drinks, they might lean in close and say, "The ocean is deeper than we know, and what lives down there, we're not ready. We may never be ready." To David Monroe, Rebecca Torres, Dr. Ahmed Hassan, Daniel Foster, and Eric Foster, 5 souls lost to the sea, or perhaps lost to something far stranger. Your families never stopped searching for answers. The world never knew your fate. But somewhere, in the deepest, darkest places of the ocean, Maybe you found what Catherine Rivera thought you found: understanding, connection, and a truth too profound for the rest of us to comprehend. May you rest in whatever peace the deep provides,